Frank, and welcome to episode 46 of But Let's Face It. Ethan Van Sciver is a talented comic book artist. I like his artwork a lot. He is a great sequential storyteller, draws a mean figure, and is an exceptional inker. He's got an impressive resume, working on many characters for the Big Two and doing fine work on them. Not long ago, he announced he was leaving DC to return to his creator-owned project, Cyberfrog. He had published a run on Cyberfrog in the 90s before working for DC and decided he wanted to go back to it. This is a common path for a lot of creators, and I applaud those who take the risk. Independent comic books are a crowded market, and leaving a steady gig to pursue a creative dream isn't easy. And it's not just the creative satisfaction that a self-made project yields, as a creator also collects the lion's share of the money when something is his or her own and not work for hire. But Ethan Van Sciver's motives for the project aren't just creative and financial, they are also ideological. He's been very outspoken against social justice warriors and feels that they and their influence are hurting the comics industry. To crystallize this, he coined the term and the hashtag Comicsgate, which he says is a movement against the current state of comic books, mostly Marvel. And my default reaction to people who hold this opinion is that I am willing to listen to their arguments. We live in a very polarized, very divided time right now, and actual discourse between people with different viewpoints is not merely acceptable, but crucial. But let's face it, Comicsgate is nuts. First of all, it just seems weird to adopt the suffix gate for this. The media adds gate to a breaking scandal to make it seem like painstaking, serious, investigative journalism was done by the reporters to uncover the story. Idiots at TMZ are not Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, but boy do they wish they were. To start a movement and put your own gate at the end of it kind of misses the point. I know that Comicsgate wishes to continue the ideology of Gamergate, but their memories are bad. The idea of Gamergate was a reaction to a product being made for a larger and more inclusive demographic in video games. The name Gamergate itself was invented to pretend that the movement was a reaction to ethical lines in video game journalism being crossed. That Gamergate was masquerading as a scandal got lost in the shuffle as it became a license to harass and abuse. Again, I'm willing to hear arguments that comic books have gotten too PC. I think there's room for that argument, but I'm really scratching my head as to how Cyberfrog is a reaction to that concept. Cyberfrog was clearly one of the many titles that was trying to ride the wave of success of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which I have no problem with. Just as there's room for lots of superheroes, there's plenty of room for superpowered animals. It would be wrong to criticize Cyberfrog as being juvenile, as that's the point. It's an action comic for kids that adults can enjoy as well. And there's plenty of those, then and now. Robert Kirkman's Super Dinosaur was a lot of fun. My daughter and I loved it. If Cyberfrog is any good, I hope it does well. But I really don't see how it's a counterbalance to anything that Ethan Van Sciver claims is wrong with comics today. If one feels that Captain Marvel is too masculine or that Domino isn't sexy enough, how does a frog and a salamander fighting hornets return us to the glory days of yore when J. Scott Campbell was drawing Caitlin Fairchild wearing next to nothing in Gen 13? The biggest conceptual problem I have with Comicsgate is that Ethan Van Sciver believes that political correctness in comics in particular, and the media in general, is hurting not just art, but sales. Even if you think that Rey is a giant Mary Sue, and she is, although not nearly as giant a Mary Sue as Will Hunting, but that's another story, The Force Awakens is still the biggest grossing film of all time domestic. Comic books are getting new readers, and like it or not, being more inclusive is often good for business. Yes, constantly pushing for political correctness at all costs can be bad for art, but that doesn't mean that progressive, inclusive comics can't be great. I really raised an eyebrow when I first opened up the first issue of Saga, but it's awesome. It really is. The crowdfunding campaign for Cyberfrog was massive, and I have to think that all of the attention surrounding Ethan Van Sciver and his opinions must have helped with that. I would be so impressed and much less confused about all this if I felt he was just trying to manufacture controversy to sell his book. If he was just pretending to be this politically charged, man, what a genius of promoting. But in listening to interviews and hearing him lash out incoherently against Patton Oswalt's criticism over Comicsgate, let's face it, he's just gone nuts.